It was the kind of day that promised nothing but ordinary routine, until everything changed in a single, shattering moment. I still remember the rush of cool autumn air and the echo of my footsteps as I stepped back into the building after a long, lazy summer break. That first day, however, was not meant to be simple. From the very moment I pushed open the heavy door, fate had other plans. I had barely crossed the threshold when my clumsy entrance turned into a spectacle. An entire stack of books tumbled from a shelf, scattering across the floor with a resounding clatter that seemed to reverberate through every corner of the classroom. The room fell silent, eyes turning towards me with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, a vivid red that mirrored the heat of my mortification. In that instant, I wished nothing more than to disappear into the very walls around me. Yet amid the chorus of whispered giggles and stifled laughter, one voice cut through the tension like a gentle reprieve, a voice both familiar and comforting. Tyler, with his steady gaze and calm demeanor, stepped into the fray without a hint of hesitation. His presence was like a quiet promise that even on the most humiliating days, there were those who saw beyond the surface, who recognized the silent strength within. His subtle smile and the softness in his eyes provided a balm to my wounded pride, and in that brief exchange, a spark of hope ignited inside me. But the day was far from over. As the classroom slowly returned to its normal rhythm, my thoughts were already swirling with the lingering sting of isolation, a feeling that had clung to me since I learned that I was an orphan, a fact that made every moment of vulnerability even more acute. The emptiness of my tiny apartment, echoing with silence long after everyone had gone to bed, was a constant reminder of the absence of warmth and belonging. And so, as I navigated through the corridors of the school, my mind was a tumult of conflicting emotions. The sting of humiliation, the faint glow of compassion, and an undercurrent of mystery that I could not yet place. Later that day, a knock at the door shattered the remnants of my fragile solace. I opened the door to find a stranger whose presence was as unexpected as it was unsettling. Tall, lean, with piercing sea-green eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets, he introduced himself simply as Kellen. The words he spoke were laden with a mysterious gravity, a revelation that he was my long-lost brother, a claim that defied everything I thought I knew about my life. My mind raced, caught between a surge of disbelief and a flicker of curiosity. Could it be possible that the family I never had been out there all along, waiting in the shadows of my solitary existence? As he spoke, his voice carried both sorrow and a strange tenderness. He recounted memories of a childhood filled with small, bittersweet details: the white frock I once wore during sunlit adventures in the woods, the carefree laughter echoing among rustling leaves, and the delicate scent of pearl buttons that symbolized a life once lived in secret harmony. Yet beneath the warmth of these recollections lay an undercurrent of heartache and mystery, hinting at truths too painful to face without trembling. In that moment, standing on the threshold of my old world and this new, bewildering reality, I felt an overwhelming internal struggle, a battle between the longing for belonging and the terror of what the truth might bring. The quiet isolation that had defined my existence for so long was suddenly pierced by a promise of connection, of a past reawakening, and of a future fraught with both danger and hope. This was no ordinary reunion, and the unfolding of this fateful encounter would soon set in motion events that would challenge everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the very nature of my existence. As the day faded into a tapestry of fading light and encroaching shadows, I could feel that something monumental was about to begin, a turning point that would push me to confront my deepest fears and desires. In the silence that followed, a question lingered in the cool air. Could this unexpected bond be the key to unlocking a destiny I never imagined? And as I took my first trembling steps towards the unknown, I realized that the path ahead would not only redefine who I was, but also forever alter the delicate balance between light and darkness in my life. The stage was set, The players had arrived, and the first lines of a story that would challenge the very essence of my soul were about to be written. The classroom buzzed with residual laughter and whispers as I tried to regain my composure, my heart still pounding from the embarrassment of my clumsy entrance. In that vulnerable moment, as the murmurs faded into a dull hum, a calm yet commanding presence entered the scene. Tyler. Unlike the others, whose eyes danced with mischief and judgment, Tyler exuded a steady assurance that seemed to silence the very noise around him. Tyler's approach was unhurried but deliberate. He moved through the throng of students like a silent guardian, his light brown eyes locking onto the group that had been ridiculing me. There was something in the set of his jaw and the way his shoulders squared, as if he were the embodiment of quiet strength. Without uttering a word, he positioned himself between me and the laughing circle, his stance radiating an unspoken warning to those who found amusement in my discomfort. "Enough," Tyler said, in a low, unwavering tone that carried more authority than any shout could. His voice cut through the remaining laughter, and for a brief moment, time seemed to still. Jeremy, who had been basking in the attention of his peers with a cocky smirk, faltered. His eyes, once sparkling with impish delight, now flickered with uncertainty as Tyler's protective presence cast a long shadow over his careless behavior. In that instant, I felt a profound sense of relief, a gentle warmth seeping through the cold embarrassment that had gripped me minutes earlier. Tyler's intervention wasn't a grand gesture filled with theatrics. It was simple, sincere, and profoundly human. The tension in the room shifted, the mockery dissolving into silence as my classmates, aware of the gravity of the moment, dared not speak a word against him. As Tyler stood there, steadfast and calm, I found my heart softening. I watched him, carefully, the way his eyes softened ever so slightly as he glanced at me, the protective tilt of his head, and the slight furrow on his brow as he ensured that every trace of my humiliation was erased by his presence. It was in these subtle gestures that I began to realize how deeply I respected him. His quiet confidence was a rare beacon amidst the clamor of cruelty and jest that often accompanied teenage life. Internally, I marveled at how naturally he had stepped into the role of my guardian, his actions speaking louder than any words of comfort could. I remembered the days when laughter would sting, and how isolated I felt. Not just because of the awkward moments, but because I always seemed to be an afterthought, someone others observed rather than truly saw. With Tyler there, that feeling of isolation began to wane, replaced by a fragile hope that perhaps I wasn't as invisible as I once believed. The classroom, usually a cacophony of adolescent energy, now seemed to pivot around his calm authority. Every gaze that had been directed at me with scorn was now caught by his intense, steady look, a silent reminder that compassion could still triumph over mockery. His intervention wasn't merely about defending my dignity. It was an act of genuine care, a subtle signal that I mattered to someone in a world that often treated me like an afterthought. I could sense a change not just in the atmosphere, but in myself. In the quiet aftermath of the confrontation, as the murmurs resumed, but were now softer, more respectful, I felt a stirring inside, a mingling of gratitude and an emerging admiration for Tyler's unyielding kindness. His presence had not only shielded me from the sting of ridicule, but had also stirred a deep, almost imperceptible shift in my heart. I began to understand that true strength often resides in the silent, steady acts of protection that are offered, without expectation or fanfare. Tyler's actions resonated far beyond the classroom. They redefined for me what it meant to be seen and cared for. I no longer felt as though I was merely a target for derision, but rather someone whose presence was acknowledged, valued, and protected. In that charged moment of vulnerability, I found an anchor, a friend whose quiet assurance would, in time, grow into something far more significant. As the day continued, that brief classroom confrontation lingered in my thoughts. I replayed Tyler's unwavering gaze, his resolute tone, and the way he had stood between me and the sea of jeering faces. It was a moment of clarity, a turning point that set the stage for an emotional journey marked by the interplay of vulnerability and protection, trust, and discovery. In the midst of teenage mockery and fleeting moments of pain, a friendship was being forged, one that promised a refuge from the storm of life's uncertainties. And so, as I settled back into my seat, my mind no longer haunted by the echoes of ridicule, but uplifted by the memory of Tyler's steadfast defense, I realized that sometimes, in our darkest moments, the simplest acts of kindness have the power to transform our entire world. After the echoes of the classroom confrontation faded into the background, I found myself embarking on a solitary journey home. The cool afternoon light slowly gave way to a twilight haze as I walked along empty sidewalks, each step echoing the persistent solitude that had become all too familiar. Every stride felt weighted by the reality of being an orphan, a life marked by moments of transient laughter from others, but a deeper, aching loneliness that clung to my every thought. The city around me moved with its own rhythmic bustle, yet I remained in a quiet bubble of introspection. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows that merged with my own. I could almost feel the silence pressing in, an uninvited companion that whispered of isolation and the stark truth that I had no one to call family. The memories of the day, the humiliation, the brief, tender defense by Tyler, and even the unsettling revelation about a brother I never knew, mingled with the bitter taste of solitude. When I finally reached my modest apartment building, the silence of its empty corridors amplified the stillness within me. My apartment was as bare as my heart felt, small, sparsely furnished, and echoing with the absence of warmth. The walls, once painted with hopeful hues, now seemed to close in, each creak of the old floorboards a reminder of nights spent alone. The flicker of a single lamp in the dim living room cast gentle, wavering shadows that danced along the peeling wallpaper, offering little solace against the overwhelming loneliness. I sank onto a worn-out couch, the fabric soft, yet threadbare, from years of neglect. In that quiet moment, I sought out the smallest comforts, a hot cup of tea, the gentle hum of an old radio playing a familiar tune, and the soft glow of my phone screen. As I scrolled through Instagram, I found fleeting distractions in the curated. Snapshots of other people's lives, families laughing together, friends gathered in joyous celebration, and moments of shared warmth that felt both real and tantalizingly out of reach. Each image stoked a quiet longing within me, a yearning for a sense of belonging and connection that had always seemed just beyond my grasp. Yet, amid the cascade of images and carefully chosen captions, there was a subtle spark, a tiny flicker of hope. One post in particular caught my eye, a picture of a sunset over a sprawling cityscape, its vibrant oranges and purples melting into each other in a breathtaking display of nature's beauty. It was as if the photo whispered a promise, hinting that even in the depths of loneliness, there was beauty to be found, and that perhaps my own life, too, held a hidden brilliance waiting to be discovered. In that quiet, almost meditative state, my thoughts drifted back to Tyler's kind intervention earlier in the day. His steady, protective presence had been like a beacon in a sea of ridicule, reminding me that even when the world seemed cold and indifferent, there were still moments of genuine care and compassion. That brief encounter had ignited a spark within me, a small, defiant flame of hope that whispered I wasn't entirely alone, that somewhere amidst the chaos of my orphaned existence, someone cared. As the night deepened, I wrapped myself in a soft blanket, its worn texture a gentle comfort against my skin. I sat by the window, gazing out at the city lights that twinkled like distant stars, each one a reminder that life continued in vibrant hues, even when my own days felt muted. The juxtaposition of the vast, modern world and my own quiet solitude made me wonder about the intricate tapestry of fate, a tapestry that might one day weave together my scattered, lonely threads into a picture of connection and love. In those precious moments of introspection, I allowed myself to dream. I envisioned a life where laughter wasn't a distant echo in empty hallways, but a chorus of shared joy among friends and family. I pictured warm embraces, late-night conversations filled with hope and vulnerability, and a future where the harsh labels of orphan no longer defined me. The dreams were fragile, like the soft glow of my phone screen in the dark room, yet they carried the potent promise of transformation. Every small detail, the gentle scroll of my finger on the screen, the rhythmic drip of rain against the window, the subtle interplay of light and shadow on my walls, conspired to create a bittersweet symphony of solitude and hope. It was in this quiet dance between loneliness and the tender promise of connection that I began to understand the true essence of my existence. The night was long, and the journey was far from over. But in the darkness, there was a soft, persistent glow of possibility, a reminder that even the smallest spark could ignite a flame capable of illuminating the deepest shadows. And so, as I sat there wrapped in solitude, yet touched by that single, radiant moment of hope, I vowed silently to cherish these fleeting comforts, for in them lay the promise of a tomorrow where loneliness might be transformed into belonging, and the harsh, empty echoes of my past could someday give way to a symphony of love, laughter, and lasting connection. The stillness of the night was abruptly shattered by an unexpected knock at the door, a sound that echoed through the silence of my lonely apartment like a herald of change. I froze, heart pounding against my ribs, as if it carried a secret I wasn't ready to hear. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath, the soft drumming of my pulse the only indication that I was still alive. Every instinct urged me to ignore the sound, to hide beneath the comforting shroud of solitude. But curiosity, a force both terrifying and irresistible, compelled me to answer. With trembling hands, I rose from the worn-out couch and moved cautiously to the door. The corridor outside was dimly lit, its shadows stretching long and uncertain across the faded carpet. I hesitated a second longer before slowly reaching out and pulling open the door, half expecting to see nothing but the quiet, unremarkable world beyond. Instead, I was met with a presence that was both startling and profoundly enigmatic. Standing before me was a man whose appearance was as arresting as the unknown secrets he seemed to embody. He was tall and lean, his muscular build suggesting strength tempered by grace. But it was his eyes that captivated me first, striking sea-green eyes that shimmered with a depth of emotion and mystery I had never encountered before. They held a quiet intensity, as if they had seen and carried burdens of a past far removed from my own. His dark hair framed a face that was both chiseled and soft, his expression a curious blend of resolve and gentle concern. "Hello, Jill," he said softly, his voice calm yet imbued with a certain gravity that sent shivers down my spine. His words were measured, as though each syllable had been chosen with deliberate care. "I've been looking for you for a long time." I stood there, stunned and speechless, my mind racing to catch up with the surreal reality unfolding before me. Questions collided within me, a tempest of disbelief, fear, and an inexplicable sense of anticipation. Who was this stranger who claimed to have been searching for me? And how could he possibly know my name? The stranger's eyes searched mine, and for a long suspended moment, I felt as if he were peering straight into the very depths of my soul. "My name is Kellen," he finally said, his tone gentle yet unwavering. I'm your brother." The words hit me like a sudden gust of wind, uprooting everything I thought I knew about my life. My heart stuttered. Brother? I had always believed that I was alone in this world, that the bonds of family were nothing more than a distant, unfulfilled wish. How could this be true? Every fiber of my being rebelled against the notion, yet his eyes, so earnest, so hauntingly familiar, insisted that there was truth behind his revelation. I took a cautious step back, my mind swirling with incredulity and an emerging curiosity. "That's impossible," I managed to whisper, my voice quivering. "I don't have any siblings." Kellen's gaze softened, a trace of sadness mingling with a quiet hope. "I know it sounds unbelievable," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, as if he feared the mere sound of his truth might shatter the fragile reality we now shared. "We were separated a long time ago, and I've spent every day since searching for you." His words, though simple, carried the weight of years spent in longing and regret. The mystery of my past, long buried under layers of solitude and whispered legends, suddenly began to unravel before my eyes. I could feel a storm of emotions brewing inside me: confusion, fear, and strangely enough, a spark of hope. The idea that I might have a brother, a piece of a family I had never known, was both daunting and strangely comforting. It was as if the cold emptiness of my life had been punctured by the possibility of belonging. As Kellen stepped a little closer, the dim light caught the subtle lines of his face, highlighting both his determination and the pain of a journey long and arduous. "I have so much to tell you," he continued, his tone husky with emotion. "About our past, about the truth of our family, things that will change everything you thought you knew about yourself." His words hung in the air, heavy with promise and peril alike, setting the stage for secrets that could either heal or break me. In that charged moment, standing at the threshold between the known and the unfathomable, I felt a tremor of anticipation. My heart, still raw from the day's earlier humiliations and solitary reflections, now throbbed with a new, uncertain rhythm. The revelation of Kellen's identity had opened a door to a past shrouded in mystery, a past that I had never dared to dream might exist. The air around us seemed to thicken with both tension and possibility. Every shadow, every quiet creak of the floorboard, resonated with the promise of answers waiting just beyond the horizon of my lonely existence. And as I stared into Kellen's sea-green eyes, I knew that the journey I was about to embark upon would forever alter the course of my life. A journey that held the potential to unravel long-held secrets, mend shattered loneliness, and perhaps, finally, lead me toward the family I had always longed for. Kellen's expression grew thoughtful as he invited me to sit down, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turbulent storm of questions roaring in my mind. In the quiet of my modest living room, illuminated only by the soft glow of a single lamp, he began to speak in a measured, almost hypnotic tone. "It wasn't meant to be this way, Jill," he said, his eyes distant for a moment as if recalling memories buried deep within him. "Our family, we were separated long ago, under circumstances too painful to share in haste. I spent years searching for you, driven by a promise I made to myself, a promise to reunite the scattered pieces of our past." He paused, and I could sense a flicker of both hope and sorrow dancing in his sea-green eyes. "Do you remember when we were little?" he continued softly. "There was a time when you used to wear that beautiful white frock, the one with delicate pearl buttons, and we would play in the woods behind our old house. The sunlight would filter through the trees, and every day was an adventure, filled with laughter and secrets. I remember chasing you through the tall grass, your laughter echoing like a melody that I longed to hear again." As he spoke, his voice wavered between warmth and wistful melancholy, a tone that painted images of carefree days and a time when everything seemed possible. "I used to watch you from a distance, not wanting to intrude on your joy, knowing that something was not quite right. Our parents, they were caught in a web of circumstances beyond our control. There were forces, dark and overwhelming, that tore us apart before we could fully understand what it meant to be a family." Kellen's eyes clouded over with pain as he revealed fragments of a past I had never known. Our separation was not simply a matter of distance or misunderstanding. There were secrets, Jill. Secrets that cast long shadows over our childhood. I was told that our mother, with her gentle eyes and fierce spirit, had to make a choice for our safety. That night, under a sky heavy with sorrow, she made a sacrifice that split our lives apart. I have searched for you ever since, clinging to the hope that one day the truth would come to light, and that we could finally reclaim the pieces of our shattered past. The air in the room seemed to thicken with the weight of his words. Each sentence carried the resonance of a hidden history, a narrative laced with both love and betrayal. I remember her smile, though it was tinged with sadness. He murmured. There was an unspoken promise in her eyes, a silent plea for us to hold on to each other, even if fate forced us to live apart. And so, for years, I wandered from town to town, following whispers, gathering fragments of memory, desperate to piece together a family that was lost to the shadows. His voice dropped to a near whisper, as if sharing a sacred secret meant only for us. I know this may be difficult to understand, but the darkness that enveloped our family is more than just a tragic tale. There were forces at play, ruthless, relentless forces that would stop at nothing to keep our past buried. I've learned that our separation was orchestrated, a means to protect us from dangers that lurked in every corner of our world. And yet in that same darkness, there was also an unwavering light, a hope that if we could one day be reunited, we might have the strength to face what lies ahead. As I listened, a mix of awe and trepidation stirred within me. The memories Kellen recounted were like faded photographs, full of both warmth and mystery, a time when the world was simple, and yet the seeds of a deeper, darker destiny were already being sown. I've carried these memories with me, he confessed, his tone laden with regret and longing. Every moment of laughter we shared, every secret we whispered, has been a guiding light in my long search for you. I needed to know that you still existed, that you had not been swallowed by the same darkness that claimed so much of our family's past. There was a pause, and for a moment, the silence between us was filled only by the quiet hum of the night. Jill, Kellen said, reaching out to gently take my hand. I understand if all of this feels overwhelming. I never intended to disturb the life you've built, but I had to find you, to tell you that you are not alone. The love we once knew, the love that bound us together as children, still exists. It may be fragile, marked by the scars of separation and loss, but it is there, waiting for us to heal and reclaim it. In that intimate space, I could feel a subtle shift, a mingling of the nostalgia of a long-lost childhood and the bittersweet promise of a future that might finally bring us together. The story of our family, so shrouded in mystery and sorrow, was slowly beginning to unfold before me, inviting me to confront a past I had only dared to imagine. And as I gazed into Kellen's earnest eyes, I knew that despite the darkness, there was a spark of hope. A promise that the secrets of our past might one day lead to a reunion that could mend the fractures of a broken family. Kellen's eyes darkened as if a storm was gathering behind them. In that charged silence, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper that vibrated with both sorrow and resolute determination. "Jill," he began, his tone laden with an intensity I'd never heard before. "There's something I need to tell you, a truth about who I am, about our family, that will change everything you believe." I stared at him, my heart pounding erratically as the room seemed to shrink around us. The familiar warmth of his earlier recollections now gave way to a cold, foreboding dread. "What do you mean?" I managed, my voice trembling, caught between curiosity and the creeping realization that nothing would ever be the same again. Taking a deep breath, Kellen's next words fell like a hammer on my fragile world. "I am not entirely human. I am a hybrid. Half werewolf, half vampire." The words echoed in my ears, reverberating in the quiet confines of my apartment, turning my reality upside down in a heartbeat. For a long, agonizing moment, I could only stand there, frozen by disbelief. My mind raced to catch up with the surreal revelation. Werewolf? Vampire? The very idea seemed like something plucked from a fevered dream, a myth spun to entertain rather than a truth to be lived. Yet, the earnest look in Kellen's sea-green eyes, the trembling honesty in his voice, left no room for mere fantasy. It was all too real, an otherworldly secret that had been hidden in the depths of our family's history. My thoughts tangled into a knot of shock and turmoil. The memories of my childhood, the warmth of the white frock, and the echoes of playful laughter in the woods, now felt tainted by an undercurrent of something dark and dangerous. How could the family I had believed to be ordinary harbor such an extraordinary, supernatural legacy? Questions surged inside me, each one louder and more insistent than the last. Was this hybrid nature the reason behind our separation? Had our parents, in their struggle against an unseen force, been forced to hide a secret so perilous that it tore our family apart? Kellen's voice, though soft, cut through my swirling thoughts with piercing clarity. I've lived with this truth every day, Jill. The power and the curse of being a hybrid. It has defined every moment of my existence since we were separated. I have fought battles against my own nature, struggling with the monstrous instincts that surge within me. And now, you must know that this part of me, this duality, has always been intertwined with the fate of our family. The tension in the room grew almost tangible, as if the air itself vibrated with the power of Kellen's confession. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, a physical manifestation of the shock that gripped my heart. My mind clung desperately to the remnants of normalcy, but Kellen's revelation shattered every semblance of the mundane life I'd known. The supernatural was no longer a distant legend. It was here, in the very presence of the man claiming to be my long-lost brother. I could see the conflict etched in his face, the quiet resignation of someone who had carried an unbearable burden, mingled with the fierce determination to finally reveal the truth. Our mother was not like other mothers, he continued, his voice heavy with regret. She was caught in a struggle between light and darkness, trying to protect us from a legacy that she herself could not escape. I believe that our hybrid nature is part of that legacy, a gift and a curse that our family has borne for generations. Every word he spoke resonated like a secret chord within me, sparking a maelstrom of emotions. I felt anger, sorrow, and a deep, unsettling fear of what this meant for my own future. Was there a hidden power within me as well? A dormant spark waiting to ignite? Or was I destined to remain forever in the shadows of a supernatural family history I never asked for? The shock of the revelation was overwhelming. My mind raced through fragments of memories, trying to piece together the clues that had always seemed too peculiar to be mere coincidences. The inexplicable pull I had felt toward the moonlit nights, the subtle shifts in my emotions during moments of extreme stress. Had these been hints of something more? Had my own life been quietly shadowed by the extraordinary, just as Kellen's had been? As Kellen's words sank in, the room around us seemed to fade into a blur. The familiar hum of the city outside, the soft glow of the lamp by the window, even the ticking of the clock, all fell away, replaced by the raw, unfiltered intensity of this new truth. I felt as though I were standing at the edge of a precipice, looking into an abyss filled with both wondrous possibility and terrifying uncertainty. The revelation left me trembling with both fear and a reluctant, burgeoning curiosity. I longed to understand this mysterious part of our past, and to know how it might shape the future that lay before me. Kellen's hybrid nature was not just a quirk of biology. It was the key to unlocking secrets that had been buried deep within, our family's legacy. Secrets that might hold the power to redefine everything I thought I knew about who I was in that charged moment. As the gravity of Kellen's words pressed down on me, I realized that my life was about to take a turn into a realm where myth and reality intertwined, where every shadow held a secret and every heartbeat echoed with the promise of both danger and destiny. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery, and though fear clutched at me, a part of me, a flicker of hope perhaps, yearned to embrace the truth, no matter how extraordinary it might be. Kellen's face grew solemn, and the room seemed to darken with the weight of the revelations he was about to share. His sea-green eyes, once full of quiet mystery, now shimmered with unshed tears and deep sorrow. "Jill," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there is more you need to know about what tore our family apart. Our parents' death. It wasn't a tragic accident. It was something far more sinister." I felt the blood drain from my face as his words sank in. My heart pounded fiercely, each beat echoing a premonition of despair. Kellen's voice dropped to a hushed, almost broken whisper as he recounted the horrifying truth. Our parents were targeted, caught in the crossfire of a war between ancient forces. They were trying to protect us, to shield us from the darkness that threatened to consume everything we loved. That night, when the storm raged and the winds howled like mourning spirits, a betrayal from within their own circle led to their demise. The air felt heavy, laden with an unbearable mix of grief and rage. I listened, my mind reeling, as Kellen painted a picture of a night filled with chaos and heartbreak. There was blood everywhere, Jill. The night sky was lit with flashes of lightning, and in the midst of it all, our home, our safe haven, became a battlefield. Our father fought valiantly, but there was too much force against him. And our mother, she made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure that we might have a chance to survive. My chest tightened, as if each word was a weight pressing down on me. Guilt and anger battled within my soul. Guilt for not having known the truth sooner, and anger at the betrayal that had shattered the family I'd longed to remember. "How could this be?" I whispered, my voice raw with disbelief. "How could everything I thought I knew about my life be a lie?" Kellen's eyes met mine with a mix of pity and urgency. "I've carried this truth with me for so long, Jill. Every day, the memories of that night haunt me. I've seen the shadows of that betrayal in the eyes of those who claim to be our friends, and I have vowed to find the ones responsible. They will pay for what they did, and our parents' sacrifice will not be in vain." The room spun around me as the full force of Kellen's revelations crashed over my senses. My mind swirled with a torrent of emotions: sorrow, anger, betrayal, and a desperate need for justice. I felt my inner world splintering into fragments, each shard reflecting a different aspect of my tortured heart. The reality of our lost family, the horror of that fateful night, and the burden of carrying a legacy drenched in blood and sorrow became almost too much to bear. In a sudden, overwhelming surge of emotion, I could no longer contain the tumult inside me. My body trembled with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I exploded, my voice rising in a crescendo of anguish as tears welled in my eyes. In one impulsive motion, fueled by years of suppressed pain and shock, I lunged toward Kellen, my hand striking out in anger. The force of my blow, both physical and emotional, seemed to shatter the fragile veil of silence that had hung between us. For a moment, time stood still. Kellen staggered backward, his eyes wide with shock and hurt. I felt a sick, twisting sensation deep within my chest, a mix of guilt and rage that almost made me recoil in horror at my own actions. "How dare you shatter my truth with your—" "Silence?" I cried, my voice echoing with the intensity of my inner turmoil. "How can you expect me to accept this unbearable legacy when it feels like my life has been built on lies and shattered dreams?" My words rang out in the quiet space, heavy with accusation and sorrow. Kellen's gaze softened, but he said nothing. His silence only intensified the storm raging within me, and in that moment, every suppressed emotion found its release. The bitterness of betrayal, the sorrow of loss, and the searing pain of a family ripped apart coalesced into a single, violent outburst, a desperate cry against the cruelty of fate. As my anger slowly subsided, I felt the weight of my actions crash upon me. My hand still trembled in the air, and for a long, agonizing moment, I could only stand there, breathless and broken. Kellen's eyes, now glistening with tears of his own, flickered with a mixture of resignation and sorrow, as, though he had expected this reaction all along, he took a step back, his face etched with pain and understanding. "I'm sorry, Jill," he murmured, his voice soft, yet laden with grief. "I never wanted to hurt you like this. I only wanted you to know the truth, even if it was unbearable." Before I could respond, before I could gather the shattered pieces of my heart and voice my remorse or demand more answers, the sound of the door closing abruptly shattered the charged silence. Kellen turned, his figure receding into the darkened hallway, leaving behind a void filled with unanswered questions and the echo of his parting footsteps. I stood frozen at the doorway, watching the light fade from the frame as his silhouette disappeared. The door's final, resounding click felt like the closing of a chapter, a turning point that marked the irrevocable moment when my world shattered and I was forced to confront the painful truths of my past. Tears streamed down my cheeks, hot and uncontrollable, as I sank to the floor. In that moment, the overwhelming sorrow and rage merged into a single soul-wrenching cry, a cry for the family I'd lost, for the innocence that had been stolen, and for the future that now lay uncertain before me. This violent outburst, raw and unfiltered, was not just a moment of uncontrolled emotion. It was the beginning of my journey to reclaim the pieces of my identity and confront the dark legacy that had haunted me for so long. After the crushing blow of betrayal and sorrow, a quiet voice from the recesses of my memory pierced the darkness. A promise Tyler had made, a promise that now glowed like a distant beacon of hope. In the midst of my heart-wrenching breakdown, that promise ignited a spark of determination within me. I recalled his gentle words from earlier that day, words that had offered a fleeting comfort amid the ridicule and isolation. It was as if Tyler had silently vowed to stand by me no matter how harsh the world became, a promise that, in that raw, painful moment, I clung to desperately. Wiping away my tears, I realized that I couldn't afford to let the night swallow me whole. I had to reclaim control, to transform my grief into a force that would propel me forward. With renewed resolve, I rose to my feet and set about changing the narrative. I hurried to my bedroom, where a wardrobe of forgotten treasures awaited me. Among them hung a stunning red gown, a garment that shimmered with a promise of passion and resilience. I slipped it on, the fabric smooth against my skin, as if it were a protective armor against the haunting memories of the past. In the mirror, I scarcely recognized the reflection that stared back. Gone was the tear-streaked face of despair. In its place was a determined young woman, her eyes fierce with resolve, her lips set in a line of quiet defiance. The red gown not only accentuated my curves, but also symbolized a rebirth, a transformation from vulnerability to strength. With one final glance in the mirror, I knew that tonight, I would not be a victim of circumstance, but a warrior reclaiming her own destiny. The pulsating energy of the night beckoned, and as I stepped out into the cool air, the city's vibrant rhythm wrapped around me like a warm embrace. My destination was a club known for its electric atmosphere, a place where the music pounded like a heartbeat and neon lights danced with wild abandon. As I approached, the thumping bass of the music grew louder, merging with the distant hum of conversation and laughter. The club was alive, a stark contrast to the stillness of my apartment moments before. Inside, the club was a sensory overload, a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and movement that made it impossible to focus on anything but the raw, unfiltered energy pulsing through the air. The dance floor was a sea of bodies moving in sync with the beat, and for a fleeting moment, I felt as though I too could lose myself in that vibrant chaos. Amid the throng, I caught sight of familiar faces, Tyler and Jeremy, two constants in my otherwise tumultuous life. Tyler's eyes shone with a quiet assurance that reminded me of his earlier promise, while Jeremy's presence added an unpredictable edge to the scene. As I navigated through the crowd, the sound of the music, the laughter, and even the clink of glasses blended into a hypnotic symphony that momentarily drowned out the echoes of my earlier heartbreak. Every step I took on that polished floor was a step away from the past, and a step toward the future I was determined to create. The red gown flowed around me like liquid fire, a striking visual against the subdued darkness of the club. I could feel the heat of the strobe lights and the rhythm of the bass coursing through my veins, each beat a reminder that I was alive, resilient, and ready to fight for my own happiness. In a quiet corner of the club, I found a small table near the back, where I could sit and gather my thoughts. Despite the vibrant atmosphere, a part of me remained acutely aware of the lingering shadows from earlier, a part of me that had been shattered by truth and betrayal. But as I sipped on a drink, its cool bitterness a counterpoint to the warmth of the club's energy, I felt that spark of determination growing stronger. The festive clamor around me was a temporary refuge, a place where I could mask the inner turmoil and project an image of confidence. Tyler's occasional glance from across the room gave me the strength to smile, even if only for a moment. His steady, protective presence was like an unspoken promise that I was not alone in this fight. The contrast between my inner struggles and the outward celebration of life was stark, a bittersweet reminder that even in the midst of darkness, moments of light could still be found. I knew that tonight was not just about escaping the pain of the past. It was about embracing the promise of tomorrow, no matter how uncertain it might be. In that pulsating, chaotic space, I resolved to let the music and the energy of the night wash over me. I would dance away the sorrow, channel the lingering loneliness into a fierce determination, and allow the promise that Tyler had given me to guide my steps. This night of escape was more than a fleeting reprieve. It was the beginning of a journey toward reclaiming my identity and rewriting my destiny. And as the club's lights flashed around me, I felt, for the first time in a long while, that I was ready to face whatever the future held. The club was a sensory wonderland, a dazzling tapestry of neon lights that pulsed in sync with the deep, rhythmic bass, turning every corner into a stage for human emotion and raw energy. As I stepped further into this luminous maze, the world around me transformed. The familiar glow of streetlights gave way to a spectrum of vibrant hues, electric blues, fiery reds, and pulsating purples, dancing across mirrored walls and scattering like confetti over every surface. The atmosphere was intoxicating, charged, with the simultaneous thrill of liberation and the undercurrent of unspoken tensions. Amidst this whirlwind of sound and color, I could almost taste the electric pulse of the music, each beat resonating like a heartbeat, urging me to join the rhythmic sway of the dance floor. Groups of friends laughed and mingled, their voices merging into a collective hum that punctuated the heavy thump of the bass. There was a playful intimacy in the air, an ephemeral connection between strangers turned confidants in the heat of the moment. Yet beneath the surface of the vibrant celebration, I could sense a delicate tension, a subtle interplay of emotions that hinted at deeper conflicts waiting to emerge. Across the crowded floor, my eyes were drawn to two distinct figures whose presence felt like two sides of the same coin. Tyler moved through the throng with an effortless grace that belied his protective nature. His gentle smile and the soft glow in his eyes radiated warmth and genuine affection. Every now and then, our gazes would meet, and his quiet reassurance would wash over me, reminding me that in this chaotic world, there was someone who truly cared. He seemed to navigate the room with a sense of purpose, calming, like a whispered promise that I was never truly alone. In stark contrast, Jeremy's presence was marked by an irreverent charm that sparked laughter even amidst the clamor. With a mischievous glint in his eye, He leaned in close to friends, teasing and bantering with an ease that was both endearing and provocative. His quick wit and playful gestures drew a smattering of amused reactions as he effortlessly oscillated between making jokes and delivering pointed remarks that hinted at something more layered beneath the surface. There was a palpable magnetism in the way he moved, a subtle reminder that even in the midst of light-hearted flirtation, undercurrents of rivalry and unresolved emotions might be simmering just below. As the night unfolded, the club became a stage for an intricate dance of emotions. I found myself swaying along to the hypnotic rhythm, the red fabric of my gown catching every flash of neon and reflecting back a vibrant, defiant image of myself. The moment was both liberating and bittersweet, a chance to lose myself in the moment, yet an undeniable reminder of the chaos and hurt that lay beneath the surface of our intertwined lives. Between the pulsating beats, there were small, almost imperceptible exchanges that spoke volumes. Tyler's soft-spoken compliments, shared with a warm, sincere smile, contrasted sharply with Jeremy's playful jabs and teasing glances. When Tyler's hand brushed lightly against mine, it was as though the world paused for an instant, and all the noise faded away into a gentle, reassuring silence. In that fleeting moment, I felt both cherished and understood, a tender comfort in the midst of the relentless rush of the night. Yet, even as laughter bubbled up, and the club's energy seemed to lift me momentarily from the weight of my recent heartbreak, I could not ignore the subtle signs of discord that danced in the background. Jeremy's teasing sometimes carried a sharp edge, a reminder of old wounds that refused to be forgotten. His light-hearted banter, though often humorous, occasionally gave way to a look of guarded intensity, a fleeting glimpse of something deeper, a conflict that had yet to be resolved. And then there were the lingering glances exchanged between Tyler and Jeremy, unspoken words that hinted at a past full of unaddressed feelings and rivalries that could one day explode into open conflict. Throughout the night, the club pulsed with both revelry and a quiet sense of anticipation. Every step on the dance floor was a reminder that, even in the midst of festive celebration, life's undercurrents of pain, passion, and unresolved history were never far away. I danced and laughed, feeling a spark of hope ignite within me, even as I remained acutely aware that the carefree joy of the moment was intertwined with the promise of future emotional battles. In that electric atmosphere, the party became more than just an escape. It was a crucible where friendships were tested and the complexities of our past were quietly simmering beneath the surface. The night was a mosaic of bright, fleeting moments of connection, each one laced with the bittersweet tang of memories and unspoken truths. And as I moved with the crowd, caught in the swell of pulsating music and shimmering neon lights, I couldn't shake the feeling that every laugh, every playful touch, was a prelude to something far more intense and profound waiting just around the corner. Under a secluded alcove near the back of the club, away from the pulsating neon lights and raucous laughter, Tyler and I found a moment of fragile intimacy. The world around us faded into a distant murmur as our eyes locked, speaking volumes of shared vulnerability and unspoken yearning. In that transient sanctuary, the chaos of the night seemed to pause, a brief lull where only the rhythm of our hearts filled the silence. Tyler's hand cupped my cheek gently, his touch both tender and reassuring, as if promising that in his arms I could find solace from the turbulent storm raging within me. His gaze, warm and unwavering, reflected a depth of care that made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way I'd longed for since the shadows of loneliness had wrapped around me. I leaned in, the desperation of my heart propelling me forward, and in that charged moment, our lips met in an intense, searing kiss. It was a kiss born of raw emotion, of pain and longing intermingled with a desperate need for connection. Every touch, every subtle caress of his lips against mine, sent ripples of both comfort and fire through my being. I could feel his heartbeat quicken, echoing the fervor of my own, as we clung to each other, desperately trying to imprint this moment of closeness into our souls. In that secluded corner, I felt a surge of hope and belonging, a brief reprieve from the isolation that had defined so much of my life. For a fleeting instant, it was as though nothing else existed. No past betrayals, no haunting family secrets, no looming darkness. There was only the intimacy between us, a safe haven where the hurt of yesterday and the uncertainty of tomorrow dissolved into the desperate passion of now. My mind, still reeling from the tumult of recent events, found a rare moment of clarity in his embrace. I let the kiss speak for the countless words I couldn't find, the whispered promises, and the silent apologies of a heart laid bare. But just as the intensity of our shared emotion reached its crescendo, the fragile cocoon of our intimacy was violently shattered. The smooth, sensual cadence of our kiss was abruptly interrupted by a harsh, discordant sound, an ominous crash of shattering glass, and the metallic scrape of furniture being overturned. The sudden clamor pierced the delicate silence, jolting us both out of our private world. I broke away from Tyler in a startled gasp, my senses reeling as the scene around us transformed in an instant. The pulsating energy of the club had given way to a sinister spectacle. Figures emerging from the shadows, their eyes glinting with a predatory gleam, and their movements unnervingly swift and deliberate. I recognized them instantly. Vampires, their presence as foreboding as it was unexpected. The room, which had moments before been a sanctuary of stolen passion, now filled with an unsettling chill. The once rhythmic thump of the bass was drowned out by the sharp, echoing sounds of supernatural movement. The vampires advanced with an eerie grace, their eyes cold and calculating, as if they had been waiting for this moment to intrude upon our stolen bliss. Tyler's hand tightened around mine, his protective instinct flaring in the blink of an eye. His expression shifted from one of tender affection to steely determination, his eyes scanning the intruders with a mix of alarm and resolve. I felt my heart drop, the intense warmth of our kiss now replaced by a bone-deep chill of fear. The intimate world we had built together was dissolving into a nightmare, a stark, brutal reminder that our lives were entangled with forces far beyond the realm of ordinary passion. The vampires moved closer, their features illuminated by the sporadic flicker of neon and strobe lights, casting ghastly shadows on their pale, angular faces. Every detail of their approach was unnerving. The silent gliding, the predatory stillness, and the cold glint in their eyes. It was as if time itself had slowed, each heartbeat a resounding drum of impending doom. The stark contrast between the fervor of our kiss and the impending threat of these creatures created a tension so thick it was almost palpable. In that shattering moment, Tyler stepped protectively in front of me, his body poised as if to confront the encroaching horror. I could see every line of resolve etched on his face, every muscle tensed in readiness, as if he were a guardian determined to shield me from the darkness. Yet, in that instant, the abrupt intrusion not only shattered our intimate bubble but also signaled the start of a new, perilous chapter. One where the fragile peace we had momentarily reclaimed would be tested by the relentless march of supernatural forces. As the first of the vampires reached out, the surreal contrast between the intimate memory of our kiss and the cold, menacing reality of their presence seared itself into my mind. The painful intrusion of violence into a moment of pure vulnerability left me gasping for air, my heart torn between the remnants of lingering desire and the immediate, unyielding threat. In the chaos that ensued, our private moment was irrevocably lost, replaced by the urgent need to escape and confront the dark forces that had just invaded our world. The night's mood shifted dramatically, plunging us into a realm where every heartbeat carried the weight of both passion and peril, a realm where love and danger danced together in an unpredictable, deadly embrace. In an instant, the vibrant chaos of the club descended into a surreal nightmare. The once pulsating neon lights now flickered erratically as if struggling to hold back the onslaught of darkness that was about to break loose. In the midst of the pandemonium, the transformation began, slow, grotesque, and utterly horrifying. Tyler was the first to change. I watched in frozen disbelief as his features contorted, his eyes shifting from warm brown to a wild, feral gleam. His skin, once smooth and human, rippled with the sudden emergence of coarse, matted fur. In a matter of heartbeats, his hands morphed into clawed appendages, razor-sharp talons that glinted dangerously under the erratic strobe lights. His jaw unhinged, and fangs erupted, elongated and glistening, as he emitted a guttural growl that reverberated through the now silent crowd. It was as if the gentle, protective soul I had known had been replaced by an unstoppable beast, driven by ancient, primal instincts. Almost simultaneously, Jeremy succumbed to the transformation. His carefree, cocky demeanor melted away under the influence of the supernatural force swirling within him. His body contorted painfully, each muscle contracting and bulging in a grotesque display of raw power. The sound of tearing flesh and bone seemed to echo off the walls, punctuating the terrible metamorphosis. His eyes, once mischievous and light, turned a feral amber, burning with a predatory intensity. The collective roar of the crowd turned to terrified screams and panicked shouts as the transformation unfolded before our eyes, a gruesome ballet of fangs, claws, and wild, untamed strength. As the monstrous forms of Tyler and Jeremy fully emerged, the club erupted into chaos. The air thickened with a primal, animalistic energy. And the dance floor, once a stage for joyous revelry, turned into a battleground of supernatural ferocity. Shattered glass crunched underfoot, and overturned tables became makeshift barricades, as people scrambled in terror, desperate to escape the encroaching nightmare. The pulsating music was replaced by the cacophony of snarls, screams, and the relentless pounding of wild hearts. Amid the bedlam, Kellen emerged from the shadows like a spectral savior. His presence, already enigmatic and complex, took on a heroic aura in that moment of pure, unadulterated chaos. Though his own nature was a tangled mix of both light and darkness, his eyes burned with determination and an almost palpable compassion. With a swift, graceful movement, he positioned himself between the rampaging creatures and the terrified crowd. "Stay back," he roared, his voice a powerful blend of command and urgency that cut through the cacophony. His stance was resolute. Every muscle in his lean, formidable frame tensed as he prepared to confront the monsters that had once been my friends. In that split second, I sensed a profound shift, a clear division between the uncontrollable forces of nature and the possibility of salvation. Kellen lunged forward, his movements a striking contrast to the uncoordinated chaos around him. With an agility that belied his supernatural heritage, he dodged snarls and leaping shadows, his own dual nature enabling him to navigate the battlefield with a clarity of purpose that was both awe-inspiring and heartbreaking. Each of his strikes was calculated and precise, a blend of werewolf ferocity tempered by a vampire's lethal elegance. He seemed to dance through the turmoil, a dark knight determined to restore some semblance of order. The impact of his intervention was immediate. As he engaged with Tyler, his eyes locked onto mine in a fleeting moment of silent reassurance. The beastly Tyler met his determined gaze, and for a moment, the furious energy of the transformation faltered, as if acknowledging Kellen's authority. Jeremy, too, was forced back by the sheer force of Kellen's presence, his wild amber eyes flickering with uncertainty amid the frenzy of his metamorphosis. In that instant, the surreal clash of supernatural forces crystallized into a fierce struggle for control. A battle not just for the physical space of the club, but for the very souls of those caught in its violent embrace. The air vibrated with the raw power of primal instincts colliding against a steadfast resolve to protect. Kellen's every movement was a testament to a lifetime spent wrestling with the duality of his own nature. And in that crucible of conflict, he was both savior and an inevitable reminder of the price of such power. As I watched, my heart pounded in my ears, a mix of terror and a fragile hope that, despite the monstrous transformations around me, there might still be a way to reclaim the humanity lost in the night's dark metamorphosis. The chaotic symphony of snarls, claws, and desperate roars faded into a background hum as Kellen, steadfast and unwavering, forged a path toward stability amid the storm. In the midst of this supernatural tempest, one undeniable truth shone through. The night had irrevocably changed everything. The monstrous forms of Tyler and Jeremy were not just a threat. They were a harbinger of the turbulent, dangerous world that now loomed on the horizon. A world in which Kellen's heroic intervention offered a glimmer of hope and a promise that, even in the midst of darkness, there remained the possibility of salvation. In the aftermath of the monstrous chaos, the club fell eerily silent. The frantic roars, snarls, and crashing echoes slowly ebbed away, leaving behind an unsettling stillness that pressed heavily on my heart. I stood amid scattered remnants of shattered glass and upturned furniture, my body trembling as the reality of what had just occurred began to sink in. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the lingering heat of supernatural rage, a grim reminder that the world I thought I knew was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I tried to steady my breath, my mind reeling from the horrifying transformations and the surreal clash of primal forces. Every detail was seared into my memory: the wild, feral eyes of Tyler and Jeremy, the unnatural, guttural growls, and the unmistakable presence of beings that defied human logic. In that charged silence, as I struggled to process the carnage, around me, a single, resonant voice broke through the oppressive quiet. Kellen stepped forward from the shadows, his figure marked by a blend of somber authority and fierce protectiveness. His eyes, still glistening with unshed tears, scanned the devastation with a determined calm. It was in that moment that the true weight of his words began to unfold, a burden he had carried alone for far too long. Slowly, he spoke, his tone imbued with both sorrow and an unyielding resolve. "They know now," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. His words sliced through the silence like a clarion call, and in that single sentence, the truth of our intertwined fates was laid bare. "You're my sister." Those words hit me like a tidal wave, unexpected, shattering, and profoundly real. For as long as I had believed I was an orphan, alone in a world that seemed to have abandoned me, the notion of having a sibling had been nothing more than a distant, almost unattainable fantasy. Now, confronted with Kellen's solemn declaration, a swirl of conflicting emotions consumed me. Shock, disbelief, and a tentative glimmer of hope battled against the deep-seated fear and isolation that had long been my constant companions. My heart pounded in my chest as I searched Kellen's eyes for any sign of deception, but all I found was a raw, unfiltered sincerity, a yearning to mend the broken pieces of a family torn apart by unimaginable tragedy. His revelation was not merely an assertion of kinship, it was a desperate plea for connection, a beacon of light in the midst of the darkness that had defined my existence. In the moments that followed, the physical remnants of the night's violence seemed to blur into the background as the emotional landscape took center stage. I felt the chill of isolation, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the dawning realization that the supernatural world, with all its hidden horrors and inexplicable wonders, was now inextricably linked to my own life. Every heartbeat was a reminder that nothing would ever be the same again, that the safety I once knew was now an illusion shattered by blood and ancient grudges. Kellen's gaze remained fixed on mine, his presence a silent guardian amid the ruins. "We have to move," he continued, his tone urgent, cutting through my swirling thoughts. "There are forces out there, enemies we haven't seen yet, who will stop at nothing to ensure that our family's secrets remain buried. You must come with me." His words carried a weight that was impossible to ignore, They were both a warning and an offer of protection in a world that had suddenly become far too perilous. As his declaration echoed in the empty spaces of the club, I could feel a new determination rising within me. The shock of Kellen's revelation mingled with the desperate need to escape the remnants of that night's horror. I glanced around, the dim neon glow and scattered debris now serving as grim reminders of the fragile boundary between the life I had known and the nightmarish reality that beckoned. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I took a trembling step toward Kellen. I'll come with you, I managed to whisper, my voice choked with both fear and a strange, budding resolve. In that moment, the promise of a safer, if uncertain, future stirred in the depths of my soul. A future where I might finally find the family I'd been denied, and where the shadow of my past could, perhaps, be confronted head-on. The door to the club stood ajar, its darkness a gateway to the unknown. With a final, lingering glance at the devastated scene behind me, I stepped through it, following Kellen into the night. Each step was heavy with the weight of unresolved pain, yet buoyed by the urgent call to safety and the fragile hope that, together, we might find a way to reclaim the shattered remnants of our lives. The threat of unseen enemies loomed like a specter, but in Kellen's steady, unwavering presence, I sensed the possibility of protection, and perhaps the first real promise of a future where I wasn't alone after all. As the last echoes of chaos faded behind us, the oppressive weight of the night bore down like a relentless tide. We stepped away from the shattered club, leaving behind a scene marred by violence and supernatural horror. The cool, biting air outside contrasted sharply with the stifling heat and primal terror that had reigned within those walls. Every step away felt like a departure from one life and the reluctant entrance into another. A world where darkness and fragility coexisted in a delicate, agonizing balance. The ride to safety was a blur of trembling silence and raw vulnerability. In the back of a nondescript car, I could feel the lingering remnants of that horrific night, the transformation of Tyler and Jeremy, the clash of supernatural forces, and Kellen's desperate intervention, all swirled together in my mind like a storm I couldn't escape. My pulse raced as I tried to comprehend the surreal events, each breath a reminder of how quickly the veneer of normalcy could be shattered. Gradually, as the vehicle slowed to a stop, the frenetic energy of the club was replaced by an eerie calm. One by one, the monstrous alterations began to recede. The savage werewolf forms of Tyler and Jeremy softened, their fur dissolving into human skin. Their eyes, once burning with a feral glow, regained a wary, pained humanity. The transformation back to human form was agonizingly slow, a reminder that the night's dark magic did not relinquish its hold easily. In that painstaking metamorphosis, I saw not only their physical pain, but also the raw emotional scars etched deep within their souls. I stepped out into the night, shivering as a cold wind cut through the lingering remnants of adrenaline. The world outside was a harsh contrast to the club's chaotic interior. Gone were the pulsating neon lights and the relentless pounding music. Instead, I was greeted by the dim, indifferent glow of street lamps and the quiet, empty streets that whispered of solitude. The journey from the club to home was not just a physical transition, it was an emotional exodus from the remnants of violence into an abyss of isolation. At home, the stark solitude was almost suffocating. The familiar confines of my modest apartment, once a refuge from the world, now seemed to mirror the tumult inside me. The silence that filled each room was heavy with memories of the night's atrocities, a cruel counterpoint to the violent chaos I had just endured. In the cold, muted light of dawn, every shadow on the wall felt like a specter of that dark night, haunting me with the echoes of fear and betrayal. I collapsed onto the worn-out couch, my body trembling uncontrollably. The remnants of adrenaline still surged through my veins, mingling with a profound sense of vulnerability that left me raw and exposed. My thoughts churned with conflicting emotions, the remnants of a desperate passion from earlier, the the terror of the supernatural, and now, an overwhelming loneliness that made the silence of my apartment all the more deafening. I stared blankly at the wall, feeling as if the violent heartbeat of the night had been replaced by a slow, mournful drum, a reminder of the inner conflict tearing at me from within. There was a lingering sadness in the way the scar ached, a quiet lament for the innocence lost and the dark secrets that now defined our lives. It was as though every pulse of pain was urging me to look deeper, to question every whispered detail of my past. In the stillness of the night, my mind wandered through corridors of memory, piecing together fragments of a life that had been overshadowed by tragedy. I questioned every moment, every word I had once taken for granted, wondering if I had missed clues that could unravel the mystery of our cursed lineage. Yet, even as loneliness and regret threatened to overwhelm me, a small ember of resolve began to kindle within my chest. I realized that to truly understand the depths of this painful legacy, I must confront the shadows head-on. I needed to find out more about Kellen's journey, about the identity of the vampire leader, and the reasons behind our family's fragmentation. There was an undeniable urgency in that pursuit, an overwhelming need for answers that could finally break the cycle of isolation and fear. The night deepened, and with it came a solemn promise to myself. I would no longer allow the haunting memories to define me. Instead, I would embark on a quest, one that would force me to confront the demons of the past, to peel back the layers of mystery surrounding my family, and perhaps to forge a path toward healing, even if the answers were painful, even if they threatened to shatter the remaining fragments of my sanity. I knew I had to face them. The scar on my neck, a mark of both loss and survival, would serve as my guide, a constant reminder that I was part of something larger, a legacy woven with both darkness and, perhaps, the possibility of redemption. In the soft gloom of my solitary room, amidst the chill of an early dawn and the residual echoes of a nightmare, I made my silent vow to unravel the secrets of my past, to seek the truth behind Kellen's enigmatic presence, and to confront the terror of the supernatural forces that had invaded my life. The journey ahead was uncertain, shrouded in darkness and fraught with danger. But in that moment of raw vulnerability, I embraced the need for answers, a beacon of hope amid the haunting solitude. In the midst of my swirling thoughts and unresolved questions about my shattered past, a new presence quietly emerged, one that would alter the balance of my haunted world. It began on a rainy afternoon when the doorbell rang unexpectedly, the sound slicing through the quiet tension of my small apartment. I opened the door hesitantly, not knowing that on the threshold stood a man whose very presence would become a beacon in the darkness. He stood there with an undeniable authority, his piercing blue eyes meeting mine with a calm intensity that immediately commanded attention. Marcus, as he introduced himself with a measured tone, carried an air of unshakable confidence, a stark contrast to the turbulent shadows of my recent supernatural encounters. His dark hair was slightly tousled, yet every line of his chiseled face spoke of resolute determination and gentle strength. There was an almost magnetic quality in the way he smiled, a smile that hinted at both hidden pain and the promise of protection. As he stepped inside, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Marcus's presence seemed to infuse the cold, lingering melancholy with a spark of hope. I couldn't help but notice the ease with which he navigated my modest living room, his movements fluid and assured, as if he had long been accustomed to walking among both light and darkness. His calm authority radiated through his every gesture, and I found myself both comforted and unsettled by the depth of his quiet energy. Marcus spoke with a voice that was both soothing and firm. "I've been sent to help," he said. And although his words were simple, they carried a weight that resonated deep within me. There was a peculiar mixture of hope and uncertainty in his eyes. Hope that he could be the anchor I so desperately needed, and uncertainty born of a past entangled with supernatural strife that I had only just begun to comprehend. In his gaze, I sensed a connection that went beyond the immediate crisis, a promise of stability in a world where everything else seemed to be slipping into chaos. As we talked, I became increasingly aware of the contrast between Marcus and the figures who had haunted my recent nightmares. Kellen, with his sorrowful eyes and burdensome secrets, had introduced me to a lineage steeped in supernatural tragedy and relentless loss. In comparison, Marcus was the embodiment of protective strength, a guardian whose very presence seemed to calm the storm raging within me. While Kellen's revelations left me grappling with the dark undercurrents of my past, Marcus offered a vision of something steadier, something that could perhaps restore a semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. He explained quietly, his tone thoughtful yet resolute, that his role was not only to provide immediate protection, but also to guide me through the dangerous labyrinth of our family's legacy. "There's a war being waged in the shadows," Marcus said, his eyes glinting with both resolve and sorrow. "For every dark secret that has been hidden, there is a light that fights to bring it into the open. I'm here to help you navigate that, to ensure you're not alone in this fight." His words, laden with unspoken promise, echoed like a pledge of unwavering support, offering me a glimpse of a future where I might finally reclaim control over my destiny. As he spoke, the contrast between his steadfast energy and the turbulent forces that had so recently upended my life became painfully clear. Marcus was the quiet counterbalance to the volatile legacy of blood and betrayal that Kellen had revealed. Where the supernatural forces threatened to drag me down into a vortex of despair, Marcus provided a refuge, a solid, tangible force that reminded me of what it meant to be human. His presence was a salve to the raw wounds inflicted by the night's violent revelations, a living testament to the possibility of healing even in the midst of darkness. Despite the comfort he offered, there was an undeniable complexity in his demeanor, a layer of mystery that hinted at his own battles and losses. His calm assurance was tempered by a deep, unspoken understanding of the cost of protection in a world where loyalties were fluid and enemies lurked in every shadow. I could see it in the slight furrow of his brow, the careful way he avoided certain questions about his past. Yet, even that guarded reserve only made his presence more compelling, a paradox of strength and vulnerability that made me both lean on him and question the true extent of his role in this unfolding saga. In that fragile moment, as I listened to Marcus's measured words and looked into those piercing blue eyes, I felt an unfamiliar stirring, a cautious hope that perhaps, against all odds, I could find a safe haven in this turbulent world. The memory of recent horrors still haunted me, but Marcus's arrival was a reminder that there was light to be found even in the darkest corners of my existence. Standing there, at the threshold of a new beginning and facing an uncertain future, I realized that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. Yet, for the first time in a long while, I felt less alone. With Marcus by my side, a protector whose stable, resolute energy offered a stark contrast to the chaotic forces of our shared supernatural legacy, I dared to believe that I might one day overcome the shadows of my past and embrace a future where hope, resilience, and perhaps even a semblance of happiness awaited. Kellen's voice was low and resolute as he gathered us together in the dim glow of early evening. "We must leave now," he said, his tone both commanding and strangely comforting. The mention of a fortress, a mysterious stronghold steeped in legend and promise, stirred something deep within me. It was as if the fortress symbolized not only safety and power, but also a new realm of responsibility that awaited us, a sanctuary where the tangled threads of our past might finally be unraveled. We piled into a rugged, old car that Kellen had arranged, and as the engine rumbled to life, I felt a strange mixture of trepidation and wonder. The journey ahead promised to be as enigmatic as it was dangerous. With every mile we left behind the chaotic remnants of the club, the familiar cityscape melted away into a sprawling canvas of night and nature. Soon, We found ourselves driving along winding forest roads, the asphalt barely visible beneath a thick veil of darkness, punctuated by the soft silver glow of the moon. The forest was alive with an otherworldly beauty. Ancient trees towered on either side, their gnarled branches reaching skyward as if in silent supplication. The occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl merged with the low hum of the engine, creating a haunting symphony that both comforted and unnerved me. Every turn of the road revealed fleeting glimpses of luminous mist drifting over the forest floor, adding a magical quality to the night, a transient, ghostly beauty that seemed to whisper secrets of ages past. As we navigated the serpentine path, my mind churned with conflicting emotions. Fear lurked in the pit of my stomach, fueled by the uncertainty of what lay ahead, yet an undeniable sense of wonder kept me transfixed by the surreal landscape. The deeper we ventured into the forest, the more the outside world faded away, replaced by the primal rhythm of nature and the palpable magic of the night. It was as though the forest itself was a living, breathing entity, one that both beckoned me closer and warned me away. Kellen, ever our guide and enforcer, maintained a steady focus on the road. His presence was a constant reminder of the dual nature of our journey. On one hand, he was our protector, determined to lead us to a place where we might find refuge from the relentless supernatural forces that plagued us. On the other hand, his demeanor carried an unmistakable air of authority and an undercurrent of stern resolve, as if he were prepared to enforce the harsh realities of our world, no matter the cost. His eyes, sharp and unwavering in the dim light, often flickered briefly to me, silently acknowledging the uncertainty that mirrored my own. Every so often, he would share snippets of information about the fortress, a place spoken of in hushed tones among those who dared to believe in the supernatural. According to Kellen, this fortress was not merely a refuge, but a stronghold imbued with ancient magic and guarded by forces that defied explanation. It was said to be a nexus of power, where the boundaries between the human and the supernatural blurred, and where destiny was forged in the crucible of both hope and sacrifice. The prospect of reaching such a place filled me with a cautious optimism, even as the unknowns loomed large. My thoughts oscillated between admiration for Kellen's unwavering determination and a lingering fear of what his revelations might entail. Was the fortress truly a sanctuary, or merely another stage in the unfolding saga of our cursed lineage? As the forest grew denser and the road narrower, I felt my pulse quicken, not solely from fear, but also from an inescapable curiosity that compelled me to look beyond the immediate danger. I longed for answers about my family's mysterious past, and the fortress promised to be the threshold to that knowledge, a portal into a realm where secrets might finally be brought to light. In the midst of these swirling emotions, I could sense that the journey itself was beginning to transform me. The gentle rocking of the car, the rhythmic whisper of the forest, and the soft illumination of the moon combined to create a meditative cocoon in which my inner turmoil was slowly, inexorably giving way to a hardened resolve. I no longer felt merely a fragile, isolated soul adrift in a sea of darkness. I was part of something larger, a quest for truth that would demand courage and sacrifice. As the road curved into a final stretch leading to the looming silhouette of the fortress, a profound sense of anticipation took hold. The ancient walls of the stronghold, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moonlight, seemed to promise not just safety, but a reckoning with the past and a challenge to forge a future, free from the chains of old wounds. Standing at the precipice of this new beginning, I felt my heart swell with a mix of fear, hope, and the undeniable pull of destiny, a pull that promised that, regardless of the challenges ahead, I was no longer alone in this battle. After what seemed like an endless journey through shadowed, winding roads, we finally emerged from the forest into a clearing dominated by an awe-inspiring fortress, bathed in the soft silver glow of the moon and framed by ancient, towering trees. The fortress appeared as though it had sprung from the pages of a forgotten fairy tale, a bastion of both power and hope, its weathered stone walls exuding a timeless majesty that promised sanctuary and renewal. As we approached, the heavy wooden doors swung open with a welcoming creak, revealing a grand entry hall adorned with intricate carvings and gleaming mosaic tiles that sparkled under the gentle light of crystal chandeliers. The atmosphere was at once regal and otherworldly, as if this place existed in a realm where the boundaries between myth and reality blurred. Servants in crisp, dark uniforms bowed respectfully as we passed, their warm smiles and courteous nods hinting at a deep-seated reverence for tradition and honor. I was led through a labyrinth of corridors that radiated an ethereal light, a blend of modern luxury and ancient mystique. Eventually, we arrived at a room that seemed to have been prepared just for me. The door opened to reveal a lavish chamber with soft, sumptuous fabrics draping the walls, and a canopy bed covered in delicate silks that shimmered like stardust. Rich tapestries depicting heroic legends and mystical creatures hung proudly, while large arched windows offered a breathtaking view of the sprawling moonlit gardens beyond. In that moment, the overwhelming loneliness that had haunted me for so long began to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of belonging. This room, with its quiet opulence and comforting warmth, promised not only refuge from the chaos of my past, but also the promise of a future where I was cherished and valued. Soon after settling into this new sanctuary, I was escorted to a grand assembly hall, a vast, cavernous space with high, vaulted ceilings and walls adorned with gleaming heraldic banners. The air was filled with a palpable mixture of anticipation and solemnity. Leaders, advisors, and dignitaries from every corner of the kingdom gathered in a semicircular formation, their eyes filled with both curiosity and respect. At the center of the hall, atop a raised dais, stood Kellen and Marcus, their expressions a blend of authority and earnest hope. A hush fell over the crowd as Kellen stepped forward to speak. His voice, rich and resonant, carried the weight of centuries and the promise of a new beginning. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, pausing to let his words settle like dew on the gathered assembly. "It is with great honor that we welcome our long-awaited princess, Jill, whose destiny has been intertwined with ours since the very dawn of our kingdom." For a moment, time seemed to suspend as all eyes turned toward me. My heart pounded in my chest, equal parts exhilaration and apprehension, as the title princess echoed through the hall. It was a word that carried both the promise of privilege and the burden of responsibility, a beacon of hope to some and a harbinger of future conflicts to others. The faces in the crowd, lit by the soft glow of ancient lamps, shone with a mixture of joy, curiosity, and quiet determination. I felt as if I were standing at the very crossroads of destiny, my past filled with isolation and sorrow, now colliding with a future brimming with uncertain promise. As Kellen's words faded, the assembly erupted into gentle applause and murmurs of approval. The formal ceremony continued with a series of rituals steeped in tradition, each designed to honor my arrival and to symbolically integrate me into the fabric of this enigmatic kingdom. I was presented with tokens of legacy, a delicate, intricately crafted pendant and a scroll bearing the emblem of the realm. Each gesture, each smile, filled me with a growing sense of purpose and belonging that I had never before experienced. Yet, amid the celebration, I couldn't shake the quiet undercurrent of tension that rippled beneath the surface. The title of princess was not merely an honor. It was a declaration that I was now a linchpin in a complex web of loyalties, rivalries, and hidden agendas. Whispers of ancient feuds and conflicting ambitions seemed to seep through the opulent walls of the hall, suggesting that the very future of the kingdom might one day rest on the choices I would make. Standing there, amid the grandeur and the mingled emotions of hope and foreboding, I felt both uplifted and burdened. The kingdom's lavish welcome, its regal splendor, and the sincere smiles of its people kindled a fragile optimism in my heart. Yet, the weight of responsibility and the hint of looming conflict pressed upon me. as though the bright light of this new beginning cast long, intricate shadows of the past. In that moment, as I stood before the assembled crowd, I silently vowed to honor the legacy entrusted to me, no matter how treacherous the path ahead might be. I was no longer the isolated, broken soul of my past. I was now a princess in a kingdom filled with mysteries, hopes, and challenges. And though the future was uncertain, I knew that this new realm, with all its opulent beauty and underlying strife, held the promise of a destiny that was entirely my own. Within the grand halls of the fortress, amid the opulence and ceremonial splendor that marked my new life, a darker truth lurked beneath the surface, a truth that revealed the kingdom's harsh reality. As the ceremony subsided into murmurs and subdued applause, Kellen's expression turned grave. His calm authority, once a comforting beacon, now hinted at a calculated urgency and unspoken demands. "In our realm," Kellen began, his voice low and measured, "there is a war unlike any other, a war fought in the shadows against a force that threatens to consume everything we hold dear." His eyes, once warm with welcome, now flashed with a steely determination as he spoke of Luca, a ruthless enemy whose name sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest warriors. Luca and his forces are relentless. They seek to shatter our legacy, to erase the bloodlines that have sustained our power for generations. The weight of his words sank into the room like a chilling draft. The very idea that our kingdom, this bastion of hope and regality, was locked in a brutal conflict against an enemy so formidable left me reeling. It wasn't merely a political or military struggle. It was a battle for survival, a desperate fight to preserve a way of life. And at the heart of this struggle was a disturbing need. The kingdom required more hybrids, beings who possessed the unique strengths of both worlds, to stand against Luca's forces. Kellen's gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my heart race. "To secure your future, and the future of our kingdom, we must strengthen our ranks. That is why an arranged marriage has been proposed for you. A union designed not for romance, but for protection and power." His words cut deep, echoing through the opulent chamber like a verdict. The notion of being wed off, bound to a partner chosen for his political and supernatural prowess, ignited a fierce storm within me. I felt my pulse quicken with conflicting emotions. On one hand, the promise of protection was undeniable, a safeguard against the encroaching darkness of Luca's wrath. On the other, my heart belonged to Tyler, whose gentle affection had once offered solace in the midst of my desolation. The idea of an arranged marriage, dictated by duty and the need to bolster our forces, clashed violently with the tender memories of a love that felt pure and unforced. Kellen continued, his tone unyielding as he outlined the kingdom's dire need. "Hybrids possess the strength and resilience required to counter Luca's onslaught. Your blood, your latent power, is a key to our survival. By uniting you with a partner of equal measure, we can harness that strength and stand as a formidable force against our enemies." His words, intended to be reassuring, instead resonated with an undercurrent of calculated coldness, a reminder that, in this new world, personal desires were subservient to the greater cause. A heavy silence fell over the assembly as I grappled with the implications. I had come to the fortress seeking refuge from the supernatural chaos that had shattered my life, only to find myself caught in a web of duty and expectation. The image of Tyler's compassionate smile, the warmth of his embrace during our secret, moments away from the prying eyes of this formidable court, clashed with the rigid demands of destiny imposed upon me by those in power. Every beat of my heart echoed with a longing for the love I knew, even as the realm demanded sacrifice in its name. As I looked around the grand hall, I saw faces filled with both hope and steely resolve. Yet behind those determined expressions lay the burden of impossible choices, of alliances forged not out of affection, but necessity. In that moment, the cost of protection was laid bare before me. I realized that the kingdom's fight against Luca was not just a matter of warfare. It was a battle fought with the hearts and souls of those who dared to defy fate. And for me, that battle meant choosing between the secure, albeit cold, promise of an arranged alliance and the fierce, unpredictable pull of my own heart. My mind whirled with doubt and despair as Kellen's words echoed in my ears. Every whispered promise of protection, every strategic union seemed to demand a sacrifice, a piece of myself to be offered in exchange for safety. The dichotomy tore at me. The kingdom needed my strength to survive, yet I yearned to hold on to the love that made me feel alive. The future, once a realm of possibility, now appeared as a labyrinth of obligations and hidden threats, where each step forward was laced with the bitter taste of sacrifice. In the quiet aftermath of Kellen's revelation, I felt the heavy cost of protection settle like a shroud over my spirit. The grandeur of the fortress, the luxurious details of my new chamber, and the honor of being called a princess were all tainted by the inescapable truth that my fate was being manipulated for the greater good. The internal conflict surged within me, a tumultuous blend of duty and desire, fear and defiance. My heart ached for the possibility of a love that was chosen freely. Yet the relentless reality of our world demanded that I play a role in a war I never wished to fight. As I stood there, grappling with this unbearable cost, I silently vowed that I would not allow this imposed destiny to extinguish the love and light within me. Though the kingdom's future, and my own safety, hung precariously in the balance, I would search for a way to reconcile the conflicting truths of my existence. The battle ahead was as much within my heart as it was in the shadowed corridors of our ancient realm, and I resolved to fight for both the protection I was promised and the love that I held dear. The next morning, the world outside seemed eerily indifferent compared to the storm that had raged the night before. As I stepped into the familiar corridors of my school, the once familiar hallways now bore the weight of whispered stares and unspoken judgments. Every glance that landed on me felt loaded with questions about the strange events of last night and about the choices that were being forced upon me. In the midst of that tension, Marcus's presence was impossible to ignore. Even before I had reached my locker, he was there, quietly vigilant, his piercing blue eyes scanning the crowd with a steady, protective intensity. His presence, like a silent guardian, seemed to push back the invasive whispers, providing a temporary shield against the scrutiny. I could sense the unspoken rivalry in the air, especially in the furtive glances exchanged between Tyler, Jeremy, and Marcus. Each of them carried a piece of my fractured heart, yet their unspoken contest for my loyalty and affection became more apparent in that charged atmosphere. Tyler, with his gentle manner and warm smile, offered a soft reassurance whenever our eyes met. There was a tenderness in his gaze that spoke of unyielding care, a promise of refuge from the chaos. His quiet presence had always been my sanctuary, a haven where I could momentarily escape the relentless pressure of my past. But this morning, that sanctuary was under threat, a threat posed by the unspoken tensions swirling around me. Jeremy, on the other hand, maintained his usual cocky charm, but his teasing glances now carried an edge of bitterness. There was something in his eyes, a flash of regret perhaps, or even a silent plea, that hinted at deeper unresolved conflicts. The contrast between his playful demeanor and the weight of the recent revelations was stark, leaving me to wonder if his humor was just a mask for something more profound. Caught in the crossfire of these conflicting energies, I felt the full gravity of the choices being forced upon me. The kingdom's demands, the pressure to play a role I had never chosen for myself, and the urgent need for protection from the supernatural threats all converged into one overwhelming force. I began to realize that my life was no longer my own. It was a battleground of loyalties, desires, and expectations that I could no longer ignore. During a lull between classes, I found myself in the quiet sanctuary of the school courtyard. The morning sun broke through a hazy sky, its gentle light a stark contrast to the lingering shadows of last night's horrors. I sat on a weathered bench, staring blankly at the ground, while my mind raced with the choices ahead. The whispered rumors and the intense stares from my peers only deepened my isolation, a painful reminder that my secret world was now on full display. It was in that moment of introspection that a desperate thought took root, a desire to harness the very power that had so violently upended my life. I remembered the transformative magic that had surged through me during that night of chaos, and how, in its most raw form, it had given me a glimpse of a power I had never known. That night, amid the chaos and the blood, I had felt a spark, a call to become something more, something capable of protecting myself from the lurking dangers. The idea of transforming, of embracing that fierce, unbridled energy as a werewolf, began to take shape in my mind. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination as I resolved that I could no longer remain the passive recipient of my own fate. The whispers of the past and the expectations of a future I had not chosen were now too heavy to bear. I needed strength, a new power that would allow me to stand against the relentless tide of enemies and uncertain loyalties. With every passing moment in that cold, judgmental morning, the idea grew more urgent. I needed to transform, to unlock the latent power within me and use it as a shield, a weapon, a means of reclaiming control over my destiny. Just as these thoughts began to crystallize into a silent vow, Marcus appeared at my side, his presence as reassuring as it was commanding. "Jill," he said quietly, his voice a blend of concern and unwavering resolve. "You don't have to face this alone." His eyes, a striking shade of blue, held a mixture of empathy and an unspoken challenge, a promise that he would stand by me, even as the rivalries around us intensified. Yet, even as Marcus's protective presence bolstered me, the tension among us remained palpable. Tyler's gentle affection, Jeremy's conflicted smirks, and Marcus's steadfast determination formed a triangle of unspoken rivalry. Each glance, each subtle gesture, was a reminder that my heart was at the center of a battle, not just for survival, but for love, loyalty, and identity. In that vulnerable, charged moment, I felt the full weight of the decisions ahead. I looked from Marcus to Tyler and back again, my eyes searching for a sign, a reassurance that I could indeed forge a path that was truly my own. The desire to transform, to become a werewolf, and wield that newfound power for protection, burned within me, fierce and unyielding. It was a plea to the cosmos, a desperate cry for help in a world where the line between human fragility and supernatural might had all but blurred. As the bell rang, signaling the end of our break, I rose from the bench with a heavy heart and a determined mind. The journey to embrace a new power, to choose my destiny amid conflicting loyalties, had begun, and with every step I took through the corridors of that judgmental school, I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with pain, passion, and the relentless search for a strength that was uniquely my own. Desperation and fear battled within me as I stood before the council of my inner turmoil. The memories of that fateful night, the violent transformations, the shattering revelations, had left me scarred in more ways than one. Now, with the weight of the kingdom's expectations and the imminent threat of Luca's forces pressing down on me, I realized that I needed power. More than just protection, I needed the strength to reclaim my life. In that moment, driven by a surge of raw, overwhelming emotion, I made a fateful plea. I begged to be turned into a werewolf. My voice trembled as I spoke. I need to transform. I need this power to protect myself and to fight for my future. Every word was a desperate cry from deep within my soul, a plea that echoed in the stillness of the corridor outside the classroom. I knew that by asking for such a transformation, I was not only challenging the natural order, but also risking everything I had once held dear. Tyler, always the gentle guardian, whose eyes had so often offered me solace, hesitated. His usually steady gaze wavered with uncertainty and a profound worry that seemed to etch itself into every line of his face. I could see the conflict in his eyes, a battle between his instinct to protect me as I was and the fear that turning me into something more monstrous might ultimately hurt the very thing he loved. His silence was a painful counterpoint to the tumult raging in my heart, and in that moment, I felt the sting of betrayal, as well as the burden of the decision I was forcing upon myself. Meanwhile, Jeremy's frustration began to mount. His face, which had so often hidden deeper feelings behind a mask of mischief, now contorted with anger and disbelief. His usual teasing tone was replaced by curt, biting remarks. "This isn't the answer, Jill," he snapped, his words laced with a mixture of scorn and concern. "You're risking everything for a power you're not even sure you want." His disapproval cut through me like a shard of glass, intensifying the pressure from all sides. Caught between these opposing forces, I felt the weight of conflicting loyalties pressing in on me. My heart ached with the familiarity of Tyler's protective warmth, a love that had always felt like a safe harbor amid life's relentless storms. Yet, at the same time, the desire to harness that untamed power to stand against the encroaching darkness grew stronger, even as it threatened to shatter the fragile bonds of affection I had with those who cared for me. In that charged atmosphere, a controversial moment unfolded, one that would forever redefine the dynamics between us. In a desperate bid to prove my commitment not only to myself, but also to the possibility of a future where I could wield this newfound power on my own, I turned toward Marcus. His steady, piercing blue eyes had always held a magnetism that drew me in, even as they evoked feelings of both safety and unease. Without a word, I leaned in and pressed my lips against his, a kiss that was at once tender, fervent, and laden with forbidden desire. The kiss was a bold declaration, a way of saying that despite the chaos of my choices and the relentless tug-of-war between duty and love, I would forge my own destiny. For that brief, suspended moment, Marcus's warmth mingled with my own trembling passion, and all the tumultuous forces swirling around us seemed to vanish into a blur of shared, forbidden intimacy. But the intensity of that kiss carried with it an undeniable charge of controversy. In that moment, I betrayed not only the expectations imposed upon me by the kingdom, but also the trust of those whose hearts I had once promised. Tyler's eyes, filled with hurt and incredulity, met mine from across the room, a silent accusation that pierced me deeply. Even Jeremy, whose frustration had already been mounting, now looked at me with a mix of betrayal and wrath. The very act of kissing Marcus, though it was born of a desperate need to prove my resolve, ignited a firestorm of conflicting emotions and unspoken loyalties. The forbidden nature of that kiss echoed like a warning through the corridors of my mind. I had chosen to embrace a power that could both save and damn me, and in doing so, I risked alienating the very people who had shielded me from the darkness. Marcus's eyes, full of a complex mix of desire and remorse, pleaded silently for understanding, yet I knew that no matter how much I longed for that connection, I was now caught in a web of choices that might tear us all apart. In the charged silence that followed, I stepped back, my heart pounding as I tried to steady my racing thoughts. The room was filled with a palpable tension, every lingering glance and heavy silence a testament to the fragile state of our relationships. I realized that the path ahead was fraught with peril, each decision carrying a cost that I had never fully anticipated. The power to transform into a werewolf, the promise of protection, and the weight of forbidden love all converged into a single, harrowing moment of truth. In that moment of raw vulnerability and forbidden passion, I resolved to fight for my own future, even if it meant shattering old bonds and igniting new conflicts. The choice was mine, and mine alone, to wield the power that would define my destiny. And as I looked into Marcus's conflicted eyes, and sensed Tyler's lingering doubt and Jeremy's burning anger. I knew that the road ahead would test the limits of love, loyalty, and the strength of the human spirit in ways I had never imagined. The night was heavy with a silence that pressed against my skin, as if the very air was laden with ancient, unspoken secrets. In a secluded chamber deep within the fortress, the preparations for the witch's ritual began. Dim candlelight flickered against stone walls, casting long, wavering shadows that danced in time with my quickening heartbeat. I could barely breathe. As I watched the witch, a figure both eerie and mesmerizing, arrange her tools with a deliberate, almost ritualistic precision. Her silver hair cascaded over a tattered black robe, and her eyes glowed with a wisdom that bordered on the supernatural. Every movement she made seemed steeped in a history of dark magic and sorrow. Around me, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension, a mix of fear, hope, and despair. The ritual, as I had been warned, was not without its cost. The witch's spell would force a transformation upon me, one that demanded I sacrifice every past act of love, every tender memory that had ever given meaning to my heart. It was a price so steep that the mere thought sent shivers down my spine. Yet, the power promised by this ancient magic, the ability to protect myself and claim control over my destiny, beckoned like a siren in the night. Marcus stood silently by my side, his piercing blue eyes full of both concern and determination. He had vowed to protect me, but even his steadfast presence could not entirely dispel the dread that knotted my stomach. I could feel my internal turmoil intensify as I realized that to embrace this newfound power, I would have to let go of the love that had once defined me. The idea of erasing memories, those delicate, cherished moments of joy, sorrow, and everything in between, felt like a betrayal of my very soul. How could I willingly relinquish the memories that had built the essence of who I was, simply to wield a power that might shield me from the relentless darkness? The witch's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts, low and resonant as she began the incantation. By the ancient laws, by the blood that binds, I call upon the forces of transformation. Let the past be unmade, that you may rise renewed and strong. Her words, heavy with a timeless power, reverberated through the chamber. As she spoke, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, and the candles flickered as if battling an unseen, biting wind. I stepped forward hesitantly, the worn circle of salt on the floor marking the boundary between the mundane and the mystical. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I crossed that threshold, each step a painful reminder of the sacrifice I was about to make. Every memory, every tender echo of love, was a part of me that I would soon be forced to forget. The notion was unbearable, a loss so profound that it threatened to shatter me entirely. The witch guided me to the center of the circle, where an ancient altar stood, its surface etched with cryptic symbols. I could see the faint outline of my reflection in the darkened glass, a ghost of the person I had been before all this chaos. Marcus's hand found mine, a silent offer of strength that trembled against the cool, smooth surface of the altar. His touch anchored me, but even it could not banish the storm of emotion swirling within me. "Are you prepared?" The witch intoned, her voice both a question and a decree. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision bearing down on my soul. The cost was immense. Every memory of love, every cherished moment would vanish into oblivion, leaving behind a void that no power could easily fill. And yet, the world outside was unyielding, and the threat of Luca's forces loomed larger with each passing moment. Tears welled in my eyes as I fought the tide of emotion. I looked into Marcus's eyes, searching for a glimmer of hope or reassurance. His gaze was steady, yet I sensed the unspoken sorrow for what I was about to lose. With a shaky exhale, I nodded, accepting the fateful terms of the ritual. "I'm ready," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the low hum of the incantation. The witch extended her hands, And as she chanted, the air around me began to shimmer with an eerie light. Ancient magic surged through the circle, a force both mesmerizing and terrifying in its intensity. I felt a searing heat beneath my skin, as though invisible flames were licking at the edges of my consciousness, consuming every memory, every spark of love, every tender moment that had once defined me. The sensation was both excruciating and strangely liberating, a paradox of pain and potential rebirth. In that suspended moment, I teetered on the brink of transformation, my fate hanging in the balance. The chamber, the witch's incantation, the cold touch of Marcus's hand, all converged into a single heart-wrenching instant of raw vulnerability. I could sense the ancient forces at work, reshaping me in ways I could scarcely comprehend. Every second felt like an eternity as I braced myself for the inevitable erasure of my past, a sacrifice demanded by the very power that I hoped would save me from the relentless darkness outside. And then, as if the universe itself held its breath, the energy peaked, a blinding surge that enveloped me entirely. My world tilted, memories flickering and dissolving into a cascade of light and darkness. I screamed silently, not in agony, but in a desperate plea to hold on to the remnants of who I had been. The cost of this transformation was clear, and though it threatened to leave me an empty shell, it was a burden I was willing to bear. In that final harrowing moment, my fate was sealed, and the bonds of love that had defined my past faded into the void, giving birth to a new, formidable power, and a future shrouded in uncertainty. The chamber erupted into chaos as the ancient magic reached its fevered crescendo. The air vibrated with a potent blend of raw power and despair, and in that turbulent moment, every heartbeat became a drumbeat of fate. I felt my body convulse as the ritual's energy surged through me, transforming me from within. The searing, heat, and blinding light forced my eyes closed as my form began to contort, a metamorphosis that was as agonizing as it was inevitable. Before my eyes reopened, the person I once was seemed to shatter into fragments. I felt my limbs elongate, muscles rippling with newfound strength. Fur sprouted along my arms and chest, dark and wild, while my bones restructured into a towering, monstrous silhouette. I was becoming a werewolf, a colossal, fearsome creature with the power to protect myself and those I loved. The pain was unbearable, like 1,000 knives tearing through my skin, yet it pulsed with the promise of a fierce rebirth. My heart pounded with a mix of terror and triumph as I ascended into this new form, every cell in my body alight with a savage intensity. But the transformation was not without its cost. Amid the roaring magic, the ancient incantation clashed with a darker force. Kellen, who had long been both a guide and a harbinger of our cursed legacy, now emerged from the shadows with eyes blazing with an almost predatory fury. His voice, laced with sorrow and anger, cut through the tumult. "Jill, you were never meant to defy our fate." In that moment, the room became a battleground where supernatural forces collided in a violent dance of hearts and destinies. Kellen lunged forward, his own energy crackling with the accumulated weight of our shared past, and the air vibrated with the sound of raw, untamed power as we clashed. My towering werewolf form roared in defiance, claws slicing through the charged atmosphere, while Kellen countered with precise, almost ritualistic strikes. The force of our conflict sent shockwaves that shattered the fragile remnants of the ritual circle, scattering enchanted symbols across the cold stone floor. Every blow, every parry, was infused with centuries of betrayal, sorrow, and unspoken longing. Marcus, ever the steadfast protector, burst into the fray with an urgency that set hearts pounding. His piercing blue eyes flashed with determination. As he intervened, his voice ringing out, "Enough, Jill! This is not the path to your destiny." His intervention, along with the presence of other guardians summoned by the kingdom, created a temporary pause in the chaotic duel. A brief moment, where the raw, clashing forces seemed to hold their breath. But even this interlude could not quell the storm raging within me. The battle waged on, a visceral struggle of loyalty and liberation. Pain and rage intermingled as every strike against Kellen echoed the agony of lost memories and shattered hopes. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, my every sense overloaded, with the conflicting currents of fear, defiance, and a desperate hunger for freedom. The spectral light of the ancient runes on the wall flickered wildly, as if reflecting the tumult of our combat. A battle where every swing of my claw was not just a physical act, but a declaration of my intent to reclaim my destiny. As the clash reached its peak, the chaos around us faded into a profound silence, a silence that was not empty, but laden with the heavy cost of each moment. In that heart-stopping pause, I looked deep into Kellen's eyes and found not only the reflection of our tragic past, but also the looming threat of a future I no longer wished to accept. A surge of resolute clarity surged within me. I was not the broken girl left behind by fate. I was a queen in the making, a protector destined to rise from the ashes of despair. With a defiant roar that shook the very foundations of the chamber, I pushed back against Kellen, my towering werewolf form, asserting its dominance over the shadows of our past. "No more," I declared, my voice echoing with the authority of someone who had finally embraced her true self. In that moment, every ounce of pain, every tear shed for lost love and forgotten memories, coalesced into a single fierce determination to command my own destiny. Marcus stepped forward, his gaze steady and filled with both relief and admiration. The other guardians circled around us, their presence a silent testament to the strength and unity of our newfound resolve. The battle, both physical and emotional, had reached its turning point. With one final decisive strike, I sent Kellen reeling, his features etched with both defeat and lingering sorrow, before he retreated into the shattered darkness of the ritual chamber. In the aftermath, as the echoes of combat faded and the ancient magic began to recede, I stood amidst the ruins of the circle, a solitary figure transformed by both pain and power. I felt an overwhelming mix of triumph and sorrow, for in claiming my destiny, I had also severed the last fragile ties to the past I once knew. Yet, in that raw, unfiltered moment, I realized that I had finally become the queen of my own fate, a guardian of a new realm where I would protect not only myself, but the future of a kingdom built on both light and shadow. The transformation had been brutal and unforgiving, yet it was my liberation. I had faced the monstrous echoes of my past, the betrayal, the pain, and above all, I had claimed the power that would guide me forward. As I stood there, beneath the fading glow of the enchanted chamber, my heart burned with a resolve that would not be silenced, a vow to rule my destiny and to protect all that was dear, no matter the cost. The aftermath was a maelstrom of shattered bodies and wounded hearts, a desolate quiet that followed the violent storm of supernatural battle. I lay on a cold, sterile hospital bed, my body battered and aching from the night's relentless fury. The once ferocious beast that had overtaken me had been subdued by the combined might of Marcus, Tyler, and even a reluctant Jeremy. In that room of stark white walls and humming machines, every throb of pain seemed to echo the cost of that terrible night, a night that had not only altered my body but had forever scarred my soul. I stared up at the ceiling, trying to piece together the fragments of memories that remained. The guttural roars, the piercing clashes of fangs and claws, and the shifting allegiances that had torn through our ranks. Amid the haze of pain and the sterile antiseptic, one truth stood out, a truth that defied all I had ever believed about love and loyalty. The battle had left me with unexpected consequences, a revelation that hit me like a tidal wave. Amid the chaos of our struggle, I discovered I was pregnant, a bittersweet, shocking reminder that even in destruction, new life could emerge, twisting fate in ways I never anticipated. Marcus knelt by my side, his broad hand warm against my cold, trembling fingers. His eyes, a deep, sorrowful blue, held a mixture of relief and profound uncertainty. "Jill," he whispered, his voice both tender and resolute. "You're going to be all right. I'm here, always." His words, though soothing, carried the weight of unspoken promises and lingering regrets. I could sense the conflict in him, the fierce desire to protect me clashing with the heartbreak of what had transpired between us. It was as though Marcus, in his unwavering strength, was trying to stitch together the remnants of our fractured past with the fragile threads of a new future. Outside, the world continued its relentless spin, a life filled with shifting allegiances and uncertain loyalties. Tyler's gentle affection had long been a haven for me, yet his eyes now brimmed with an ineffable sadness, as if mourning the loss of the girl I once was. And Jeremy, whose mischievous charm had always veiled his deeper emotions, now wore a face lined with regret and guarded hope. In the quiet chaos of our shared sorrow, I could sense that our bonds were irrevocably changed. The lines between protector and betrayer, lover and friend, had blurred into a tumult of conflicting emotions. In that sterile room, I listened to the steady beep of the monitors, a relentless metronome marking the rhythm of my fragile new life. Every pulse, every breath, reminded me of the stark reality that I was now a vessel of both sorrow and unexpected hope. The prospect of motherhood brought with it an agonizing mix of fear and wonder. Would this child, born of the night's violent magic and the chaotic clash of our fates, be a symbol of redemption, or another chain to bind me to a past I desperately wished to leave behind? Marcus's protective gaze never wavered, though I could see the torment behind his eyes. His hand continued to cradle mine, a silent vow that he would shoulder the burdens of our tangled destinies. "I promise," he murmured, "that you will find a way to be free, to break these chains of sorrow. We'll face whatever comes next together." His promise was a lifeline, a fragile beacon in the vast darkness that had swallowed us whole. Yet, in the recesses of my mind, the memories of that dreadful night and the sacrifices that had been forced upon me mingled with the tender hope of renewal. I felt the weight of the kingdom's expectations, the looming threat of enemies like Luca, and the unresolved tensions between Tyler, Marcus, and Jeremy all pressing upon me. Each of them represented a piece of my past and a fragment of the future that was now my burden to bear. Their shifting loyalties were like an ever-changing tide, pulling at the edges of my resolve. As I lay there, my body aching and my heart heavy, I realized that the path forward was shrouded in ambiguity. The battle had been fought, but the war was far from over. I was left with the raw, aching aftermath, a cocktail of physical pain, emotional heartbreak, and the uncertain promise of a new beginning. The hospital room, cold and unyielding, was a stark contrast to the opulence of the fortress and the turbulent energy of the night. Yet, it was here, in this vulnerable space, that I would begin to redefine my identity. I knew that the choices I made in the coming days would determine not only my own fate, but also the future of a kingdom teetering on the brink of chaos. With every labored breath, I vowed to fight for my freedom, to reclaim the remnants of love and hope that had not yet been extinguished. I was determined to rise above the heartbreak, to transform the scars of the past into the strength of a future where I could be both a protector and a queen in my own right. And so, as the monitors continued their steady beat and the light of dawn crept softly through the window, I found myself at the crossroads of destiny. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and hidden enemies. Yet, in the quiet hush of that hospital room, a fragile new beginning was taking shape, a beginning that promised redemption, even as it left the questions of loyalty and sacrifice lingering in the air, unresolved and haunting, beckoning me to discover what lay beyond the horizon.